Chef Paul Sorgule to the show. Chef
Adam, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, buddy. I don't know. All the technology seems to be a little off today, so we're just going to kick it old school and just go with a phone call. So thank you very much for taking some time out in your very busy schedule. Chef, your writing is so straightforward and yet eloquent, and it's one of the things that I wanted to talk about quickly. But you've been a prolific blog writer, and I know that you spent a great deal of your career as an educator. Did you always write?
No, this is really something I picked up later in life. When I made the jump to go into consulting in 2012, I needed a vehicle to just get my name out there and kind of get some chatter going about the types of things that I do and the types of things that I believe in. So it's really been since 2012.
And it's been very well.
Although
Go ahead.
Yeah, I did write a couple books. But.
You did, and I want to kind of get into the second one in a little bit here, which is fascinating. But have you found it to be an effective vehicle insofar as I guess it would be number one is kind of setting up a conversation with potential clients, and it's also kind of a great way to establish some mastery or some perceived mastery by people who might want to hire you. But has it worked well for you?
I'm not so sure that I can quantify that it's worked for consulting, but it's certainly given me a voice, and I've identified an audience. Actually, probably one of my largest audiences is the line cook, and I've kind of taken that type of individual under my wing as a person that I need to talk to and talk about.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think your latest article is "Don't Dismiss the new batch of cooks." Is that? I'm paraphrasing.
Yep. That's correct.
It's a subject that's close to my heart as well. Having come up through the ranks. For those who perhaps are not familiar with your work, can you kind of give us a brief synopsis on where you've been and what you've been doing and how you find yourself here in this point?
Sure.
In time?
I'm an old school guy. I started off at 15 washing dishes and, didn't want to go to college, and my parents made me go to college. And the only thing that had any kind of interest for me was the kitchen. So I went to a hotel school. Spent 2 years at the hotel school, got my first job interview as a assistant manager in a restaurant, and the GM did a wonderful service for me. He tore me apart and told me everything I didn't know and said you need to go back in the kitchen and learn more about the kitchen and work your way out. So I went back in the kitchen, did an apprenticeship program, and I really never left the kitchen. So I spent the first 12 or 13 years working my way up to eventually a chef position. And then in 1977, had an opportunity to get involved in a culinary program as a teacher, and spent the next 30 years doing that. Went back in the industry at the age of 55 as an executive chef in a resort. Kicked my ass, if I can say that online.
Yes, you can. We enjoy profanity here.
It was a great experience for me. I never let my cooks see me sweat too much, but it gave me a chance to really bring back and understanding what happens in the kitchen. Because, after you're in education for so long, you become a little bit distant from it. So I did some really cool things there. We brought the restaurant up to 4 diamond status, and I work with a lot of young guys and girls that, had very little, if any, experience whatsoever. And collectively, we made it happen, and it was just such a rewarding experience.
So what was it about?
And I went back.
I'm sorry. Please go ahead. No, finish, please.
And then I went back into education. I was vice president at a college in New England, culinary art school, and spent 4 years there. And then finally said, it's time for me to do something different. And that's when I went into consulting. And I work now with restaurants. I work with culinary schools. I work with commodity boards, and it gives me a chance to really kind of spread my wings and offer back some of the things that I've learned over the last 40 some odd years. And
so what was it about the industry that kind of inspired you in the first place to get involved?
I think it was I had a job. It was when my parents pulled me aside at the age of 16 and said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to be a rock star." And that was not going to work out for me. So the only other alternative was to get a job, and I got a job washing dishes. And I like the people, and that's, if you have to ask me today what it is about the industry that I still enjoy, I enjoy the people. It's they're transparent, they're straightforward. What you see is what you get. They're honest in their own way. They're hardworking. Everything about them I like. I just enjoy that environment.
I think that's why your work resonates with me so much, because I, like you, started washing dishes at 15, and it took me probably 30 years of my career to come back to my truth, which was the reason I fell in love with the business to begin with, was the relationships and the people in the business that really made my heart sing. And it's only when I forgot that and made my career about something else other than, trying to achieve something or trying to prove something, that I really kind of fell off my track. So I totally get that. What was some of the challenges that you faced, aside from the physical, going back in the industry after being an educator for so long?
Well, I think, the education there's an umbrella there. It's a protected environment. What you don't have is the pressure of the moment. There's an immediacy that has to happen, a sense of urgency that exists in the restaurant that, kind of gets weaned out of you over a period of 30 years. And I knew that going into it. I knew it was going to be an adjustment, but it was tough. It took me probably the first 3 or 4 months to get into the groove of that again. I'm an old school guy, but I'm also a purist, and I like to do everything from scratch, and I like to do everything in the moment. And suddenly realized I had to pace myself a little bit differently. You can't do everything a la minute when you're serving, in a restaurant that does $2.5 million a year in sales. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an adjustment there. How do you stay true to your philosophical beliefs when it comes to cooking and still be able to do the job? I mean, that was the tough part. Other than that, it's working with people every day they bring their own little issues to the table every day, and you have to learn how to be empathetic and still get as much out of them as you possibly can. Be fair and be firm. All those things that, sometimes you can exude a little bit more patience in the classroom, and, there's a little bit less room for that, when you're in the real world. So,
right.
But, I adjusted, and we did a great job, and I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot of things. And, even at 55, you can learn and you can grow. And that was a cool thing. And
you've also been invited to cook at the Beard House, have you not?
I had some great highlights. It's the old, 15 minutes of fame type of thing. So, I was honored to be part of the New England Culinary Olympic Team in 1988. Went to Germany, won some gold medals. We were actually the most awarded team in history in the Culinary Olympics. That was a pleasure. I got a chance to cook at the Beard House when I went back in industry. Was invited there. That was an absolute thrill. It's like going to Mecca.
Yeah, Bill.
When you walk in the Beard House, it's a really cool thing. I've done some good things with the ACF, and all that kind of stuff is great. And it never would have happened had I not started washing dishes when I was 15 years old. So you look back at those points in time in your life that really turned you around and made a difference. And as simple as it is, that was my moment. That first tray of dishes going through the machine.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because your second book was published last year, and it's a book of fiction, and I believe the title is The Event That Changed Everything. And I know that's it's set in a fictional format. Would you say getting that job at 15 was the event that changed everything for you?
It was an event that changed everything for me. It's not necessarily the crux of the book.
No, I get that. Yeah.
But that's there are a few of those points along the way that really made a difference. I think going into education was one of those points. It allowed me to. I got my master's degree. Who would have thought? I didn't even want to go to college when I was 16 or 17 years old. So, I never would have done that had I not started in education. I probably wouldn't have been on the culinary team because I wouldn't have been able to afford the time if I was working day and night in the kitchen all the time. So, everything kind of happens, I guess, for a reason. I don't believe in happenstance. I think that, the planets aligned and they were aligned the way they were supposed to. And I wound up where I am. And I'm real happy that all those things occurred.
Now, have you spent the majority of your career in the Northeast?
Yeah. I had a chance to go elsewhere, but I'm a Northeastern guy. I like it up here. I like the seasons. I was born and raised in Buffalo, so I'm used to winters. And now I'm in the Adirondacks, and I'm not sure which is worse, Buffalo or the Adirondacks. Right? It's actually 18 degrees outside this morning, and it's snowing. So,
but man, oh man, is it beautiful up there.
Yeah. And yes, 2 days ago it was 63. So it's a roller coaster.
There was an article that I read of yours that I actually quoted you in a subsequent piece that I wrote, or on the radio show, where you posit that that the industry itself is to blame for its abdication in the education of our youth, and that's at some point. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but it hit home for me in a way that I'd never heard it before, was that that when you came up in the industry as an apprentice, you learned everything from the ground up, and you 3, 4, 5, how many ever years later it takes, when you're on the line, you are not only a consummate professional, but you also have a wealth of information and experience at that point because you've learned it at the elbow of someone else. But at some point, the industry, and I put air quotations around it, as some deep dark behemoth that made a unilateral decision that we weren't going to waste time with apprentices anymore. We were just going to abdicate that responsibility to the schools because we could no longer warehouse chefs in training, but rather wanted it to be more cost effective just to be able to hire somebody out of school, and that's come around to bite us in the ass.
For sure. This is a flag I've been waving for a while now. Having been in education for 30 years, one would think that I believe that's the only way to go. And that couldn't be further from the truth. First of all, I'm a strong believer in apprenticeship. I'm glad to see it starting to regain its energy and come back. I think that's a real important thing. Number one, because college is not for everybody.
Right.
I don't believe that everyone, just because you're an American, has to have a college education to be successful. I think that the cost of culinary education today, no matter where you go, I think is abhorrent. And it's very difficult for young people to be successful when they get out because they can't pay back their student loans, particularly not on $12 or $13 an hour.
Right.
So I think apprenticeship is definitely a way to go. And I think what happened, and I can't pick the exact year, but it was somewhere probably in the late 70s, early 80s. Before then, most major hotel companies and restaurant companies had their own internal training programs, and they would build people up from the ground up, from the dishwasher to executive chef at some point in time. And I think at some point in time they said, hey, you know what, let's give that responsibility to these schools, and we can concentrate on making money. And lo and behold, now you have a situation where they've distanced themselves from these young people coming up through the ranks. They don't understand their needs. They are not happy necessarily with the training that happens in a lot of culinary schools. I can't tell you how many chefs have said to me, even with all these kids out there, I can't find anyone that can do the work. So, well, you have to take some responsibility for that training. And I think until our industry says, let's collaborate with the schools and let's take some of that responsibility back and let's help to train this next generation, I think we're going to suffer from this dilemma that we have now. Just not enough people to fill the jobs.
And as onerous as some tuitions are in some for-profit education systems out there, they've even had to scale back. I mean, to my knowledge, nobody gets taught how to break down an entire side of beef. I mean, I've heard some crazy stories about how they even teach ice carving, by using a projector against a piece of ice in order to basically cut around the shapes. I don't know if it's truth or that's urban legend, but I do know from my own experience that it's a fool's errand to expect someone to be able to come out and be able to butcher down a subprimal just because they went to a culinary school.
Right. No, they can. You'll be lucky if they can bust out a chicken.
Right.
So it's and that's not. I'm not faulting the schools.
No.
They're encumbered by the system that we have in education that requires, a variety of courses to complete a degree that limits the number of credit hours that they can offer for a 2-year or a 4-year degree. It makes it very, very difficult for the school to do things in the right way. And the right way is really repetition. You get better at something the more you do it. And even that busting out that chicken, if you have a class on, breaking down a chicken today, and that's the first time and the last time you ever do it, you're never going to be good at breaking out a chicken, right? So you got to do it time and time and time again. Exactly. So whether it's busting down a side of beef or making a stock, there's no room in most culinary curriculums for repetition. That's why that apprenticeship model is so good, because they're doing it day in and day out, and they're doing it for a guest on the other end, and there's that sense of urgency that they have to learn right from the get-go. That can't be offered in a school.
And I'm in listening to you. The other thing, and I'm kind of connecting it to some of my work in which I advocate less leadership and more mentorship. But I realize in hearing you speak that if in fact we as a culture have abdicated the responsibility of training our younglings to the school, then I think somewhere along the way we've also abdicated our responsibility to be compassionate mentors or to show them or to mentor mature professionalism to them, thinking that they've already gotten that somewhere. And then when someone comes in and spins off in the middle of the line because they're under a little bit of stress or they spent all night drinking, we expect them to act differently. Yet, again, we've abdicated that responsibility, saying, well, not on my shift, man. I got too many other things to worry about. And I think that's a tragedy because everybody's looking for, nobody's really looking for leaders anymore. They want people who are going to mentor and who are actually going to be transparent and open and vulnerable within reason and context to a particular situation. But they don't want to be told what to do. They want someone to actually, to some extent, I know it's bullshit by somebody's standards, but give them the reason why it needs to be done, and then most of the time they're more than willing to do that. Wouldn't you say that's correct? Absolutely, and I look at to be a chef is just like being a parent. You have a responsibility beyond getting the food out and satisfying customers and making a profit, and that primary responsibility really, because none of those things will happen unless you've got a great team of players that work together. And your job as a parent is to help nurture that person at some level, to challenge them, to push them, to tell them no or to tell them yes at some point in time so that they can get better at what they do. And when a chef says, my responsibility, ends when I tell that person to do a particular task and they do it or they don't do it. It's just like a parent that advocates their responsibility to nurture somebody and allow them to grow and blames the school. It's not the school's fault that a kid doesn't turn out well. It's oftentimes the parent's fault and how they're brought up. And it's the same way in the kitchen. So if probably the best chefs are the ones that are good parents. Right. If you're a good parent, you're going to be a better mentor in the kitchen too. Right. And I know that there may be, some kitchen dogs or pirates or brigands out there who would probably chafe at the notion. But the immaturity, and I say this with all due respect because for a large portion of my career, I was the poster child of bad behavior and incredibly immature, even in the role of chef, and really didn't understand what it was like to coach and mentor anyone until I got my ass kicked, bounced out of the industry, and then kind of came back to it from the side before I realized, again, what my why was and how I did it was to basically have lots of conversations elbow to elbow with people, whether that's, prepping or in the back room or in the cooler or whatever. Do you think that there's also an aspect of this career that's probably undervalued chef as storyteller?
Of course, it's there's this thing I've written about this a few times. This whole phrase, yes, chef.
Yeah, sure.
And I believe in yes, chef. And the reason I believe in it is that I fully believe that everybody likes to be guided. And even though those crusty pirates are in the kitchen might, ruffle their feathers a little bit and say, I don't need to be pushed or told what to do or guided. I'm my own person. They all respond well to that yes, chef thing, just like they like the organization and the structure of a kitchen, because people do like to be guided. That's an important aspect to growing up and maturing. And so I think I lost track of your original question, but I think that whole thing about being in an environment where the chef is that person that provides you with that structure to learn and to grow and to be successful is very important.
Yeah, and that's incredibly valid, and thank you for the follow-up. But I was just kind of curious about, because I was just reflecting on my experience as a parent, and in the best moments of my career as a professional, when by telling a story or a relevant story to what was going on, it could usually drive the point home a lot better than me just basically, kind of telling them what to do, but in order to use an analogy in which so that they get to bring their own aha to it as well. But not only from an associate standpoint, but I think also, like, we're so used to perhaps telling the story of a great ingredient on a menu, but we may not necessarily be so good at using our own lives as a story to tell others, especially around that mentoring maturity thing. That's so important, the storytelling. And the storytelling has to be based on experiences. And when you're sincere in telling those stories and the experiences you've had, good, bad, or ugly, they are those aha moments for a cook or chef, because then they say, it's just like me. He understands what I'm going through. He understands the situation I'm in right now. Absolutely. And we all have those stories. The longer you've been in the business, you get those stories. Some of them are actually funny. Some of them are pretty tragic. And, absolutely.
That's what maturity and experience offers that can't be offered elsewhere. I'm going to go a little bit off topic, but kind of related. There's that young kid. I can't think of his name, but he's apparently very, very talented. He's like, 15 years old or whatever. He's done these 7-course dinners, a la Thomas Keller style and everything. And I guess he's got a great palate. And, the media keeps promoting him as, this chef, and he's going to have his own restaurant. And he's going to have a crew. And I'm thinking to myself, this poor kid.
Right.
Because he doesn't have those stories. He doesn't have that. He can't mentor, a line cook that's 22 years old. It's going to tear him up, and it's because you don't have that wealth of experience to be able to say, I've been here, and this is why that's not going to work, or this way it has to be this way. So I think it is really important to be a storyteller, to have substance behind it, so that those stories make sense.
Right. Not be bullshit and try to tell something that happened to somebody, but actually speak from a vulnerable place where it actually happened to you. Because I also think like that recognition is really important. Like, not only does the chef see me and understand me, but chef always also represents somebody who went through the same things that I did and still, and it became a chef. So I can see myself in you and be able to, like, okay, it's not so bad right now. I can still get through this. I can still, So, chef, do you find, this may be a little off topic, but since you're, now cranking out work, written work so often, do you find that culinarians in of themselves are not necessarily ones, like, they'll consume your content, but they might not necessarily comment on it? Do you find that to be?
Oh, yeah. It depends on the topic. It's funny. I can go back. I haven't done the analytics, but I can go back and look at the title of an article, and if the title of the article strikes a chord, then I get this enormous readership on that one. And it may not be, from my perspective, the best article I've written,
right?
But it strikes a chord, and then I'll get comments from people, and sometimes they'll be a little crass, but who's my audience? My audience are the pirates in the kitchen,
right? Exactly.
And then I'll write another article that I think is great and really on point and says something that's important, and I'll get 300 people that read it over a period of a week, So it's yeah. So yeah, they have a tendency to. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, really good article, very important to me. However, it's too long, and it was like, 300 words or 400 words. So they don't like to read, they don't like to comment.
Well, we're all busy, right?
Topic,
right? They want to be able to skim through it and collect evidence about why their experience is relevant and right. And just got done speaking in New York City at the ASAF conference, and I was presenting a little thing about 4 steps to a fulfilling culinary career. And the folks that came were very grateful and very gracious about the presentation. And yet I kind of walked away thinking, gosh, I wish there might have been a couple more. Now I know that's ego, because it really doesn't matter about the quantity or the quantity of people in there. But really, if one of them walked out with whose perspective was shifted a little bit so that they don't end up making the same mistakes that I did, then I consider that a job well done. Yet it seems like sometimes, because I started a consulting company in 2005 for the industry, and I realized pretty early on that those in most need of consulting were the ones that were least interested in it. So that's interesting you bring that up. Let me tell you, because when people ask me what's the toughest part about being a consultant, I say, well, there's 2 types of clients out there. There's one that calls you up and says, things are going pretty well. Restaurant's successful. People love our food. We've got a great team in the kitchen, but we want to figure out how to get to the next level. Right.
And then there's the other one that calls you up and says, I'm drowning. I'm going down for the 3rd time. We're about ready to close. Can you come in and fix this? And of the 2, the one that will actually listen to you is the one that's doing fine. And the one that's really struggling and about ready to go under is the one that just doesn't pay any attention to what you have to say.
Right, because
ironic.
They're committed to their own story, whatever the hell that is.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a shame. So, Chef, you've been married 40 years.
41.
Congratulations. I think that makes you amongst one of the rarest of our breed, someone who's enjoyed a successful relationship for that long. What's been the key?
I think number one, you have to appreciate each other. You have to give each other space. You have to, understand that you both have, your family objectives, but you also have your personal objectives, and to be understanding and supportive. And then also, be honest. And my wife is my number one critic. She'll tell me real quickly when she thinks that I'm not doing something the way it should be done. And it's always been that way, and, but on the other hand, she rarely says no if I want to do something differently. When I went back into education and went to that school in Vermont, I had to live in Vermont 5 days a week, and I came home on the weekends.
Right.
And to anyone else, that might have been a real tough move for a marriage, But my wife said, "Yeah, you ought to do it. We'll make it work," And so it's that. The other thing I always tell people is make sure that each of you has your own money. You got your joint account, but then you also have that little account on the side there that you could do some frivolous things, without asking the other person for permission. I think that's always a good thing.
Did you guys agreed on a limit to where you didn't have to consult the other?
We never had that, but it was pretty much unsaid, but very clear. If you're going to spend a couple $100, that's something we ought to talk about.
Right, exactly.
But you want to go out and have a few beers with your friend, or you want to buy a book online, whatever. Yeah, you do what you want to do. The other thing is have kids. Kids are the greatest thing in the world. So I got 3 kids, 3 grandkids, and another one on the way. So, that's what life's all about.
And your kids, well, that's an interesting perspective, Chef, because I've spoken to quite a few younglings coming out of the gate, and my advocacy for them has always been get a hobby. And they freak out at that. They're like, nope, culinary industry is my life. Cooking is my life. It's going to give me everything. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't cuddle up with that at the end of the night.
No.
So, I mean, and unfortunately, it's like you tell your child, don't stick your finger in the light socket. Don't stick your finger in the light socket. Boom, there you go. Okay, now what do you think?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's
to have a balance of perspective, to have something else other than your work is incredibly important for longevity, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it's essential. It's essential because, at some point in time, you got to go home. And to go home, and to not have somebody to talk to, hopefully not too much about work, but just to talk to and confide in and laugh with. That's a great thing, and my greatest accomplishment in life is having 3 kids and 3 grandkids. That's everything else pales in comparison. You might not know that when you're 25 and just starting out, but certainly the older you get, you keep things in perspective and you see that's it. When you can help a young kid grow and mature and watch them become a good person, I mean that's what life's all about.
Chef, incredibly well said. So I'm going to ask you in closing for two pieces of advice. So one is, what would you say someone who's not necessarily coming into the industry, but maybe has been in the industry 2 to 4 or 5 years, and maybe they've had their good days and their bad days, but now they might look at themselves in the mirror trying to think, what the hell am I doing here?
Best word of advice is, you own your career. If you're stuck, then it's up to you to figure out how to get unstuck. And, one of the ways that I always found to do that best is to find your benchmarks, identify a mentor, and find somebody that's going to help you along the way. It's everything I've done that's yielded some level of success in my life is because, I decided I wanted to do that, and I found the right person to help me do it. If you're just sitting back and saying, "Oh, woe is me, the world is not treating me fair, I'm not getting anywhere," well, it's your responsibility to make that change. And if it's the environment you're in, the restaurant you work for, then find another restaurant. Find a place where there's a chef that likes to mentor, that invests in people. Find a chef that's doing something different, and go and work there. Or if you find a point in time that this industry just doesn't do it for you, then do something different. But you own your career, you own your success. Don't blame anyone else.
Chef, expand a little bit on what do you mean by benchmarks?
Benchmarks would be, I find that there's companies, businesses, it doesn't have to be restaurants, or people that I really admire, and there's something about them that I would like to emulate. I like Apple computers. Why do I like Apple? Because I always like their cutting edge creativity of saying, here's something we're going to develop, and nobody realizes that they're going to want it. But when we develop it, they're going to want it. I like that, and I learn from that, and I try and figure out a way to incorporate that in what I do. That's a real important thing. I look at chefs. I mean, I've got a half a dozen chefs that I consider to be my inspiration, and it's not always because they make great food. It's because of the way they treat other people, the way they treat their families, the way they look at the world, and I hold them in very high regard. And very often I will take those benchmark people or those benchmark companies, I'll reflect back on them and say, okay, now what would you do in this particular situation, or how would they approach this? I think that's really important to have those. Even as simple as, how many young people have worked for you that can't really get the flavor profile of a dish right? And if you look back on it, it's really because they've never had that product themselves. They've never tasted it. They don't know what it is. If they don't know what a good burger is, they can't make a good burger.
Right, exactly.
If you don't have those benchmarks in life, then you can't apply it to your situation today.
So while we were in New York City, someone someone I know went to Per Se, and they had a dish that they had tried to emulate in their own kitchen without ever having tried the version at Per Se's. And he got back, and I asked him how it was, and he said, "Yeah, I finally found out how it was supposed to taste."
Yeah, exactly. You know, oysters
awesome.
and pearls. You know, the Thomas Keller classic.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, you can read the book, but it ain't going to cut it for you.
It ain't going to cut it. Now, would that be really, really similar advice to someone who's been in their career maybe 10, 15 years? And maybe not, they're not necessarily burnt out, but maybe they're starting to lose their edge a little bit, and you know, trying to think, maybe I should stick with this or should I continue on?
Yeah, well, I think to some degree it is, but you know, again, just because you start off in the restaurant business doesn't necessarily mean you have to end up in the restaurant business. I mean, one of the things that I found is that a lot of the skills that you learn in a kitchen are transferable. It doesn't make any difference, you know, whether you work in the computer industry, the hotel industry, or farming. If you've learned the trait of being dependable when you're in the kitchen, you're going to apply that to no matter where you go. If you are keen on organization and structure, and you believe in mise en place, which is something that we teach immediately when you go into a kitchen, that's applicable no matter where you go. So, you know, if you reach that time in your career and you say, I'm not happy, I'm not sure I want to continue to do this, don't think that you're stuck. You know, you can get out and you can do something different, or you can just say, let's restart this and let's leave where I am now and let me go and work with a chef somewhere else and learn something different. You know, go to that benchmark and say, hey, you know what, I've been doing this for 15 years, but I want to start over again. Can you teach me? You know, so it's similar, but you know, don't feel stuck. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people can't get by.
And they just suffer in silence. They just keep grinding it out because, you know, they think they got to bring home the bacon or whatever. In my own experience, one of my most satisfying positions, believe it or not, after almost 25 years of being chef, executive chef, corporate chef, I took an executive sous chef position supporting one of my best friends when he took over a property in Western Virginia, and that was like one of the greatest times I'd ever had, you know, to be able to come back in and not carry the weight of or the mantle of ultimate responsibility as the executive chef, but be able to assist and, you know, kind of focus on what I did best was really refreshing. So sometimes not only moving to a different location, but also a slightly different position can sometimes be incredibly invigorating.
Yeah, it can re-energize you.
Exactly. And I think if the 5-year cycle philosophy works for restaurants, and that, you know, you need to update the menu and update the interior every 5 years, then why wouldn't that be the same way for us in our careers?
Yep, absolutely.
Chef, I think go ahead, please.
I was going to say, and you never know. You know, you never know where you're going to wind up.
Exactly. And why did you write a book of fiction?
You know, when I started putting my thoughts down, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, just kind of journalizing things, and I found that I kind of enjoyed doing that. I kind of enjoyed the whole writing thing. The first book I put out was, not that great, but it was kind of a self-reflective autobiography thing.
Sure.
I wanted to write my experiences down, and I put that out, and you know, I don't know, I sold 400 copies, something like that. And, you know, I thought, about 5 years later, I thought, geez, you know, I've got some other ideas, some other things that are floating around in my head. Let me just start to outline them. And I enjoyed it. I mean, I write because I enjoy it. I don't write to make money. I'm certainly not making any money at it. But I do it because it's just kind of a new thing for me, and it's just, it's gratifying. I enjoy it.
And why? And that's probably as good a reason to do anything, right? As you enjoy it.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Chef, and if folks want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Well, first of all, the blog is Harvest America Q's, that's CUES, .com, or my website, which is harvestamericaventures.com. That's my consulting site. You can also access the blog through that. So it's all there. I love working with restaurants. It's a lot of fun. Again, I'm not doing it to make any money anymore. I've done my work thing. This is more gratifying, just kind of working with people and helping them through their problems.
And are you still submitting articles to or blogs posts to the ACF blog as well?
I do the ACF blog once a month. I write for San Pellegrino, which is FineDiningLovers.com, and I write for Cafe, which is the Center for Advancement of Food Service Education.
Fantastic.
So it keeps me busy.
I'll bet it does. Chef Paul Sorgule, man, thank you very much for taking the time, and can't wait to connect soon.
Adam, maybe we can meet up face-to-face sometime.
I sure look forward to that, Chef. Be well.
Take
Keep
care.
warm. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.